Hey folks, welcome to my world. It's Dominique back here with you. I did not plan to get on here tonight, but I am going to do that because I know that tomorrow I will end up, as I usually do, running out of time, having lots of work to do, and honestly just feeling unprepared because I'm going to be busy at an engagement tomorrow night, as many of you I'm sure also will be. And actually that is going to tie into what I'm going to talk about tonight and why. So I think it's important that I get this particular episode out before New Year's Eve really truly commences in its entirety. And I wanted to give everybody an opportunity to listen to this podcast episode before they went out driving tomorrow on New Year's Eve. Now, many of you may think, well, you know what, I'm not going to be drinking, I'm not going to be using drugs, and probably going to be following the traffic laws pretty closely, so it doesn't matter, I'll be fine. But I want to assure you that while your commitment to safety is definitely going to be appreciated by the other drivers on the road, it is really important. It is really important that, sorry guys, but that we drop and that you drop the assumption that innocence is a shield. It's not. If you're pulled over, you're more than likely to be charged with something. Now, whether or not that sticks in court, it's going to be a real headache and a real pain in the rear for you. And it's not going to be a situation that you're going to take lightly. And I don't want you to have that wake-up call. Now, I do want to just preface what I'm about to say by letting you know that this is absolutely not, and I do mean, this is not a dog whistle thing. I'm dead serious, folks. I am deadly serious when I say that this is not in any way an excuse to be able to cheat the system and drive drunk or drive high or God knows what else people do because they're ignorant or immature or simply selfish. So this is not something I'm putting out there because I want people to be able to get away with crime. That's certainly not the case. I absolutely do not advocate driving drunk. I absolutely 100% do not advocate driving impaired. And I would not suggest doing anything illegal at all. That's not what I'm about, and that's not what I'm suggesting. And I want to be clear before I start out telling you how to hopefully get out of and definitely handle in a legally sort of back you up legally way, in a legally appropriate way, a Tarry stop by the police or a roadblock stop by the police. Now let's really quickly talk about the differences between being pulled over by a police officer, which is, as I just mentioned, called a Tarry stop, and a roadblock stop. Now, a roadblock stop, unfortunately, although I think technically it really is unconstitutional, it hasn't been ruled so in court. Unfortunately, the police have the right to conduct these unconstitutional, I guess, setups, if you will, ambush, entrapment scenarios. And so they can actually set up a roadblock, and they can do it tenuously, legally, at this point in time. And unfortunately, they don't need probable cause. They don't need reasonable suspicion. They just need y'all to drive through wherever their roadblock is. And there you go. They have the right to harass and arrest and collect. And, you know, that's unfortunate because I think that most people out there are not out there driving drunk, are not driving away from a bank robbery or a homicide. I mean, we are pretty predictable people. Predictably, we have places to go, and we need to travel to and from those places. They're pretty benign for the most part. They're not big, like ISIS planning meetings or Al-Qaeda planning meetings. It's more like PTA meetings or going to the gym. But try telling the police that when there's tax money involved, right? Now, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say, and I'll mention this again when I really get started here, that by saying that, frankly, there are good police officers out there. There are quite a few good police officers out there, but unfortunately, the mental sort of examinations and the aggregation of data that they use and the way that they set up the questions, even on the entrance exam for police officers, really lends itself to sort of filtering out the well-balanced people that have empathy, kindness, compassion, and sort of free thought, and sort of filtering in more the sociopathic, narcissistic, chip-on-the-shoulder types. It is what it is. It's a fact. I'm not out here to be disrespectful to police, but let's call a spade a spade. The data is there to support this claim. I don't make claims that the data doesn't support. So if you take umbrage with that, well, then I think your path is clear. If you're a police officer, you take umbrage with what I'm saying right now, then I guess your path is very clear. You need to do your best to work from inside the organization that promotes this state of affairs to change that, right? So rather than railing against me because I'm talking about facts, do your best to change those facts, right? That's personal responsibility right there. And while there are really good police officers, and I'm going to come clean, I'm friends with some of them. I have friends, acquaintances, and professional connections who are in law enforcement, who are in first responder careers, and they're amazing people. But there are, like I mentioned, some real holes in the theory that only good people sign up for law enforcement careers. Particularly the sort of lower level law enforcement, like patrol cop. And if you're running into a narcissist or a sociopath and you're on the business end of their patrol car, if you will, you can end up having some problems. Innocence is not an excuse, and it's not a shield. So let's get that straight. Let's lay it on the line before we begin. Now, in a Tarry stop, as I mentioned, there needs to be a reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed. In a roadblock situation, there does not. It's almost a process of filtering out people who might be breaking the law or who might just be good targets and a good giver of tax money at the very moment in time that police officer is working, who needs to fill their quota, who come through their roadblock. So you do have less rights with a roadblock, and while you have the right to turn around or to turn off before the roadblock, they actually have cars with cops in them waiting and ready to go right after your ass and to follow you around that corner. You turned off before a roadblock, I don't care if your mom lives on that street. We're going to follow your ass to your mom's house, and we're going to pull you over, and we're going to charge you with something. We might even wait for you outside your mom's house for you to get back in the car so we can charge you with, I don't know, DUI, robbing a bank, I don't know, whatever. But the fact is that innocence is no excuse and it's no shield. That being said, I'm going to tell you how to handle yourself in any of these situations. First, I'm going to very briefly address how you might handle yourself in like a roadblock situation. And again, I'm going to put it out there. I'm not a legal professional. I have studied law personally, but I am not a legal professional. I have not passed a bar exam. I am not a registered attorney. I am not Dominique Esquire. I am just somebody with an interest in my own rights and being able to support, protect, and defend my own rights, and to communicate what rights I know of for myself to you, because our rights are the same. We're all citizens of this beautiful country. We're in this beautiful country. Our rights are pretty much the same. So, while I'm not a lawyer, I use this advice myself, and I'm just sharing that with you. So, at a roadblock situation, well, first of all, let's walk it back. Before you even go out on New Year's or around the holidays or at night, or just really any time that you're going to be in the car for a substantial amount of time, any time that you're going to be passing a lot of police roadblock type areas, speed traps, what have you, it might be a good idea to do this. This is a little trick recommended by a Nevada area lawyer. I believe he is out of Las Vegas. And if I can find his information again, I will share it here, and I'll edit that into the description of this podcast episode after we're finished with it. But this lawyer recommends a very interesting strategy. And the strategy is basically getting hold of a large Ziploc lock and seal bag. I don't know if that's the name for it, but I prefer those ones with a little handy thingamajig. That's a technical term, guys. Thingamajig. At the top, where you kind of like move the little plastic slider and it fully locks the bag into place. So get you a Ziploc bag, a nice Ziploc bag, one of the big fancy ones with the plastic thingamajig on the top. And then get yourself a long piece of sturdy string or twine. Maybe twine would be a good idea. I want you to punch a very, very small hole at the top of the bag, just large enough for the twine or the little, piece of thread or small rope or twine or whatever you're going to use to fit through, and then to double up in your hand. You're going to tie both ends together in your hand so that you're not going to have to worry about the knot getting untied, either accidentally or on purpose. But stay with me. I know this sounds kooky. So you've got your Ziploc bag with the fancy thingamajiggy on the top, and then you've got a little hole punch or like scissors to poke a very small hole where you can put through the thread or the twine or whatever you're using to keep the bag in your hand without having to actually hold the bag. And so you're good to go. You've tied up the twine or the rope or the thread that you're using. It's maybe in a sailor's knot or some other kind of knot that's not likely to come undone. The knot is in your hand. It's sturdy and in place, right? So this has got to be a sturdy setup, and I will try to send you pictures or maybe a link to a YouTube video of how to do this. And so you're going to take that, make sure that the knot is tied tight at the top, and you're going to open the plastic bag with the fancy thingamajiggy slider, and then you're going to take your license, your registration, and your proof of insurance, whatever that might be, as long as it's legal, and you're going to take that and put it in the bag. If possible, you're going to have it all facing one side. So you don't want it all willy-nilly all over the bag. Some of them are facing backwards, some are frontwards. No, you want them all facing a certain way. If you can, kind of get the air out of the bag and start sliding those items around so that they're in some semblance of order and you don't have to deal with the police for very long. So what you're going to do once you've got the items in the bag is seal it up. You've got that little hole in the top of the bag so you can kind of press the most of the air out of it without having to reopen the seal. And then you're going to make sure that your long piece of twine or thread or string or rope is long enough that you can dangle the bag out the window. So as you're driving, you've got this all set up. It's all in the bag. It's like on the passenger seat next to you. You're driving at night. You approach a roadblock, a police roadblock. And again, you're smart, you're savvy, you're canny. And so you realize that innocence is not protection. It's not a defense. And so you're going to go ahead like a pro, like a boss. You're going to pick up the tied end of that string, twine, thread, rope, what have you. You're going to pick up the tied end in your hand. You're going to dangle the plastic bag with all of your ID and info in it out your driver's side window. Roll that driver's side window all the way up so that only the bag, some of the string that's attached to the bag, and the items in the bag are accessible to the person on the other side of your window. Now, for this to work, you have to have all of the windows and all the sunroofs and all the tops of your car, all of the doors closed, rolled up completely. So keep your car entirely closed. Every single piece of it, every bit of it. You want every window closed. You want the top up if you drive a convertible, obviously. And you want the sunroof and moonroof closed if you drive a car that has a sun or moonroof. And then, of course, like I mentioned, all windows up. If you don't trust your backseat passengers, you can turn on that window child lock if you need to. But keep the windows up. The police officer, when you pull through that roadblock, will very likely still try to stop you. They will still try to stop you. They will still try to engage in conversation. They'll knock at the window. They'll tell you to roll it down. You're simply going to point to the bag. You're going to have your hands on top of your steering wheel so that they can't say that you're reaching for something and, God forbid, escalate the situation and injure or kill you or somebody who's in the car with you. Right? So you're going to come to a complete stop. You're going to make sure that your hands are on top of the wheel. You're not going to move. You're not going to reach for anything. But that bag is already outside the window. It's secure. Your items are in it. The police officer can fetch those items if they like. They can run your plate. They can run your information. And then they put it back into the plastic bag when they're done because legally they have to return it to you. And if they really want to be jerks about it and let you go somehow without your items, you can come to the police station the next day and get them. But your freedom, your life, your finances are not worth opening that window and conversing and getting sucked into a back and forth, or God forbid, having that cop go, "Oh, I smell something coming from your car." No, you're at this point, because of how this is structured, the plastic bag technique, because of how it's structured, you don't even have to interact with the police officer. And I think that's really the beauty of this situation. Again, no disrespect to the police out there that are there doing a good job and trying to maintain law and order. I'm sure that when you pull somebody over, being the good person that you are, you have reasonable, articulable suspicion, probable cause. I'm sure that when you confiscate something, you have a warrant. But look, some officers don't. So it's important to be able to look out for our own rights. So this is what you need for a stop like this, for a police roadblock. You got that plastic bag out there. The police officer maybe knocks at your window. You wave a hand if you feel that's appropriate, keeping your other hand on the wheel. Point to the plastic bag. Put your hands back on the wheel. Simple as that. They can't do anything to you. They can't do anything with this because you're not giving them anywhere to go or anything to do. So they're going to have to let you go. They're blocking up traffic. There's no criminal intent. There's no reasonable, articulable suspicion. They've pretty much got to let you go. So no matter what happens, resist the urge to step out of the car unless you are ordered to, of course, by the police officer. Resist the urge to converse. Resist the urge to roll down that window. Just do the plastic bag trick. It is there for a reason. And I feel like if multiple lawyers now, after it was originally put out there, are recommending this, you know, they're probably doing so for a reason, because it is helpful. So that's the information I'm passing along to you. You do with that what you will, okay? You do with that what you will. But let's get started into the body of how to behave when you're encountering a police officer. Perhaps you don't encounter them just at a police checkpoint. You are pulled over, you're stopped. There's a Tarry stop happening and you're the target of it. Okay. So, first thing I want to tell you about that is that just like any encounter with the police, they're not pulling you over or stopping you to attempt to help you or likely to help anyone else or to maintain safety or order or law or anything like that. Much of the time, police are pulling folks over and engaging in profiling. And some of the examples that I had thought of in that vein are, what kind of car do you drive? A nice car, a newer car, an older car, a beater, a lemon? What kind of car do you drive? They're getting information from everything they can see about you, and they're deciding whether you make a good mark or not. And then, of course, are you black or brown? Or are you white? Are you alone or are you with others? Are you young, middle-aged, older? Do you appear to be a man or a woman? All of these things give them information that's either going to make them more or less likely to pull you over and hassle you and perhaps try to come away with a charge or a conviction or at least a kind of ticket citation tax collection sort of situation. In the county that I live in, representatives of our own sheriff's department have actually stood up at county board meetings and casually acknowledged our current tax collection quotas on record. Lovely, huh? So apparently, based on the information I could find, these so-called quotas, at least in our area, and at least at the time that I heard all of this said at the meeting I was at, the county board meeting I was at, from a representative of the sheriff's office to the county board members in my county. At that time, the quotas were at least one DUI and at least one seatbelt violation ticket per officer per shift. So to me, at least, this doesn't sound like protect and serve. This sounds like, oh, here's an opportunity to collect some tax money. Let's do it. Let's go ahead. Full disclosure, folks, I have been on the receiving end of such targeting. The first time that this happened to me, I was very young. I simply explained to the police officer what I was doing and where I was going, hoping that honesty would be the best policy, and it didn't end well for me. In fact, it ended up with bogus charge being added to and then subsequently removed from my record. This is when and pretty much why I decided to study up on my legal information and study up on my rights. All subsequent interactions that I've had, at least with police, all while I've been abiding the law, by the way, not breaking it, I might add, which started in a negative way or seemed like they were going to go real quickly down a hostile or negative route, have actually been successfully de-escalated by me. Simply by way of just kind of respectfully, but firmly and repeatedly asserting my constitutional rights. Excuse me. I have not had a ticket or a charge since I learned about my rights and how to stand up for them. And I applied my consulting and communication professional experience to how I interact with police when I have to. Not that I have to often, but a few times I have been pulled over or stopped on the street. And it's never been when I'm doing some awful thing. Not that I tend to do awful things or break the law, but I've not been doing anything when I've been stopped, when I've been pulled over, profiled, what have you, right? So given that, though, you would think that maybe I would have some charges on my record or at least some tickets. I don't, because I've been able to successfully negotiate my way out of things. And spoiler alert, the less said, the better, folks. The less said, the better. And yes, this is coming from me. I do recognize the irony. So anyway, here's my civilian advice. I just want to reiterate that I can't take any responsibility, and I do not accept any responsibility for whether, when, why, where, why. I said why twice. Whether, when, where, why, or how you or anyone else choose to implement said advice. Okay? So I can't and don't take any responsibility for if, how, etc. you implement the advice I'm passing along. So, my best civilian advice to anyone who is pulled over is to collect your insurance, your license, registration, immediately, well before the cop reaches your window. Really important stuff. And then to keep those items in your hands, with your hands on top, resting on top of the steering wheel. And folks, this is incredibly important. Not only do you want to have all those items and documents in your hands, and your hands are resting on top of the steering wheel, but you want to have your foot off of the brake with your car in park. Now, if it's nighttime, you need to keep your headlights on. And again, make sure that all of the windows, top, sunroof, doors, etc. are closed, completely closed. Trunk closed, everything closed. Except if you're pulled over in a Tarry stop, on your driver's side window, which can be, if necessary, rolled down up to 2 inches. Do not roll it down any more than 2 inches from the top of your door frame. Do not roll it down any more than 2 inches. This is important stuff. It may seem silly or arbitrary. It's not. It is very important to keep in mind. So keep your windows up. And if you have to roll your driver's side window only down, it's going to be 2 inches down or less. No more than 2 inches. I would say the less the better. Okay. Now, if you have passengers in your car, I'm going to need you to instruct them that no matter what happens, they don't say anything. The only thing they're going to say, if necessary, is, "Officer, I don't answer questions." That's all they need to say. They can ask if they're being detained too. But it's just going to be, "Officer," or "Sir," or "Ma'am, am I being detained?" And "Officer," "Sir," or "Ma'am, I don't answer questions." They're going to ask you questions, but it's your right to refuse to self-incriminate. So you tell them flat out, "Officer," or "Sir," or "Ma'am, I don't answer questions. I don't answer questions." And then the only thing else you need to say is to repeat that important question to them. Am I being detained? So that's all anybody in the car is going to say. You might have a passenger who wants to tell the cop a story. Even telling a truthful story is not going to help. It's going to make things worse. They can misconstrue what you've said in court. They can lie to you legally. Just please take just about every lawyer out there's advice and don't say anything. Even lawyers don't say anything when a police officer pulls them over. Just, "Sir," or "Ma'am," or "Officer, I don't answer questions, and am I being detained?" That's all you ask. And again, coach your passengers on this. Nobody needs to be spinning tall tales or even telling true stories, because looking out for your rights means protecting your privileged information and not incriminating yourself. So, on that same note, if the officer says to you or your passengers, and I was kind of joking, but not really, when I said you might want to put the child lock on your windows if you've got children, intoxicated people, or just people in general in your car, because you need to be in control of the situation, because you're likely going to be the one who's in trouble should any of your passengers talk you into a situation with the police. So if the officer says to you or your passengers, "Hey, you know what? I can't hear you. You need to roll that window down. Hey, roll that window down." They might do it that way. They may do good cop and bad cop. They may pick one and stick with it. Or they might just play dumb and say, oh, I can't hear you. You got to roll your window down. Oh, hey, sir, I can't hear you. You're going to have to roll that down. No, you don't have to roll that down. Absolutely not. So you keep the window up. If you have to crack it at all, it's less than 2 inches or up to 2 inches. I think being conservative is best and erring on the side of caution is best. So here's what you say to that: respectfully and appropriately, calmly, because the reason that the officer is doing this is that it's a ploy for them to say that they quote unquote smelled something coming from your car, smelled alcohol on your breath, or what have you, smelled pot. So you don't roll the windows down. It's 2 inches or less. But when the officer says, inevitably, oh, I can't hear you, sir, you've got to roll that window down, or hey, buddy, roll that window down, however they go about it, you're going to very, very respectfully, calmly, and assertively. The only thing you say is very respectfully, calmly, and assertively, repeating the question, officer, am I being detained? Say it with me. Officer, am I being detained? Let's try it again. Officer, am I being detained? When they ask you why you think they pulled you over, simply say, I don't know. And that's all. You don't elaborate on it. And then if they continue to talk, or if they stand there, or if they act menacing, or if they simply just don't let you get on your way, you say, what do you say again? I want to hear it. Say it with me. Officer, am I being detained? Now, because this is a Tarry stop and you haven't done the plastic bag window trick, I mean, I guess you could try it with a Tarry stop. There's no harm in it. But assuming that's not what you do and this is a Tarry stop, you're not prepared for it necessarily, but you do, because you did think quickly when you saw those lights in your mirror, you grabbed all your information so that the officer couldn't say you were reaching for anything or acting, dangerously or suspiciously. You grabbed all that information. You've got it. Before the officer walks up to your car, you tell them, officer, now I'm going to hand these documents that you've asked for through the window. I'm passing my documents through the window right now. If you notice a hand on the gun or agitated behavior, now some people might say you shouldn't even say that, but here's why I'm going to tell you just that I would say that if I were you. Because you don't want to be shot. Let's be real. You don't want to be shot. Now, a really important thing to pay attention for is if you notice a hand on their gun, like I started to mention a moment ago, or agitated behavior, you may actually consider adding something into the mix along the lines of, officer, calmly, again, and assertively, officer, and clearly, calmly, assertively, clearly enunciate, be respectful. Officer or sir or ma'am, I have nothing on my person or in my vehicle that could cause any harm to you or anyone else. I'd like to hand over the documents you've asked me for. Now they're in my hand and I'll be passing them through the window slowly. That's all you need to say. That's all you need to say. And if they don't seem nervous at all, you don't need to tell them you're handing the documents over. Just slowly pick one hand up off of the wheel, hand them through the slit in the window, roll that window back up, or keep it very, very open, just a very, very tiny bit, just cracked, 2 inches or less. Now, when they run back to their car and run your information, they probably aren't going to find anything, but whether they do or not, they are going to come back to your car more than likely and start badgering you or asking you questions or just dragging their feet and hoping to make you nervous or make you approach them or slip you up, trip you up, that sort of thing. So all you say, keeping that foot off the brake, by the way, and off the gas, keeping your lights, your headlights on, and keeping your car in park and your hands on top of the wheel at all times during the interaction. You're just going to say again, sir or ma'am or officer, I don't answer questions. Am I being detained? Odds are that the officer will, again, even still, continue to press you, try to fluster you, or even lie to you outright, which is unfortunately perfectly legal for them to do. And your constant refrain is going to be, again, officer, I don't answer questions. Am I being detained? If they say no, then let them know calmly, without reaching, without moving around. If they say no and they're still hanging around and they haven't walked back to their car, you're going to let them know, okay, officer, have a great evening. I'm going to be on my way. Or just have a wonderful evening, officer. Good evening. Because you don't want them to have any reason to say that you were resisting or what have you. You want a very clear-cut situation wherein you follow the law. All of the camera information, all of the recording information is going to show that, and they don't have a leg to stand on, right? And we're going to get to something else that's important in that respect a little bit later on. So that constant refrain is, before they let you go, obviously, sir or ma'am or officer, I don't answer questions. Officer, am I being detained? So, ma'am, I don't answer questions. Am I being detained? And then they say either, yes, you're being detained, or no, you're not being detained. And if they dawdle around or fool around or try to just skirt the issue, then again, your constant refrain is, what now? Say it with me. Officer, am I being detained? And if they ask you questions, no matter how tempted you are to explain yourself or answer them, it's, sir, I don't answer questions. Now, am I being detained? Now, very quickly, before we move on to other ways to protect yourself, let's talk about the possibility of search or seizure. This is a really unfortunate possibility, but it must be discussed. Firstly, if they say that you're being detained or ask you to step out of your vehicle, you need to make sure you're being detained. But odds are, if you're being asked to step out of your vehicle or comply with any orders therein, it's likely you're being detained. But let's be sure. So again, what do we say? Officer, am I being detained? And then they ask you a boatload of questions and you say, ma'am, I don't answer questions. Ma'am, am I being detained? That's all you need to say. That's your constant refrain. And they're going to start realizing sooner than later that they can't get blood from a stone. And you're doing something that is perfectly legal. You are standing up for your own rights. You're standing on your rights. Now, you never want to approach them and say, now, I know my rights, or I'm standing on my rights. What do you think? You don't want to be like that. You want to be respectful. You want to be straightforward, and you want to be firm. And you want to project confidence. But a respectful level of confidence. Let's be real with that. Let's be 100% honest and say that it needs to be a respectful level of confidence. So if they say you're being detained, you ask for your lawyer immediately. And if they say you're not and they're starting to walk away, then go ahead. If they're walking back to their car, I would say wait for them perhaps to get to their car. Maybe pretend you're looking for something. Don't reach for anything, but maybe click your light on above you, your dome light on, like you're looking for something, or you're putting away your documents so that you don't get shot. I know it sounds silly, but it's happened, guys. It has happened. So wait for that officer to pull off, or to get in their car, put their seatbelt on, and put their car into gear. Now, if they just stand around and they're making it a little uneasy for you, A simple, okay, officer, have a wonderful night. Have a good evening. Thanks, have a great evening. Again, respectful, clear, to the point, concise. The opposite of me. But really, being respectful and firm is very important in these interactions. Now, sadly, many times police are not going to even know what rights you have. So you're going to actually be prepared with more knowledge than they have. I know, but it can be true. It can be true. It has been true in many instances where someone has been pulled over or detained. So it's better to be safe than sorry, and it's better to know your rights than to not know them. Now, should the police not say, okay, have a good night, no, you're not being detained, bye-bye, and they want to escalate things, they may attempt to search your car or your person. A simple and clear, officer, I do not consent to search, should do the trick. Now, if they're already trying to dig through your things, perhaps you weren't too smart and you okay to search, just officer, I'm invoking my right to end this search. Please stop the search. I do not consent to search. Right? Now, something that I have done and said is to be safe, and you make up your mind as to whether or not this feels right for you. Something I've said is, officer, I do not consent to search or seizure. Because I happen to think, for me at least, it's been an important distinction to make. And it felt right to me at the time. Now, there may be lawyers that recommend specific wording. I think you'll be safe with a simple, officer, I do not consent to search. Contrary to popular belief, like I mentioned, you can end a warrantless search at any time by saying what I just said, what I just repeated to you. Officer, I'd like to end this search. I'm revoking my permission for this search. Or, officer, I no longer consent to search. Or even just to be on the safe side, just officer, I don't consent to this search. I mean, it's on record. You've said it, and that's what matters. Now, a Tarry stop, contrary to a roadblock, a Tarry stop or a traffic stop is not going to be a situation where there's likely to be a warrant or probable cause involved unless you do or say something really dumb and the cop, takes heed of that, or unless the cop tries to make up some BS, reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed. And even then, you can end a search at any time by saying what I just told you. But because traffic stops are a different animal, Tarry stops are a different animal, it's really important to be armed with all the facts. Now, if the officer asks you to step out of your car, you must do so. There are a lot of people who are confused on this issue, but you've got to do so. However, you needn't perform any roadside sobriety tests or consent to search or seizure per your rights, like I mentioned. And here's something for you spoonies out there, and those of us who are disabled to keep in mind. If you're unable to comply with the order to exit your vehicle, and sadly, guys, I do suggest that you try to comply, because unfortunately, if you don't, you may risk being shot. I know it's not fair. I know it's not right, but it is what it is. And, I'm talking, if you have to say this to them, hey, officer, I'm disabled and I'm not able to get out of the car, then you better damn well be disabled to the point where you can't get out of the car. You better have a wheelchair in the back of the car. You better have your leg in a cast. I'm serious, because I don't happen to believe, and this is based on fact and evidence, that police are adequately trained in how to work with folks who are mentally, physically, emotionally, developmentally disabled, or on a differently abled spectrum in any of those areas. And they are unfortunately woefully lacking in de-escalation techniques. Most police officers only know how to escalate things and not how to appropriately de-escalate things. So if you don't get out of the car, it better be a damn good reason. Y'all better have both arms in a cast. Well, you probably wouldn't be driving, but one arm and one leg, okay, in a cast. And that cast is connected. Like, your arm and your leg are both casted, and those casts are connected. I'm serious. If you can get out of the car, you're going to have to if you're ordered to. And that's part of the reason why we need to be respectful yet firm in the initial stages of this unpleasant interaction, because we don't want to get to the point where we're being ordered out of the car, right? That's not a helpful situation. It's not a good situation to be in by any stretch. So if you are truly disabled to the point where you cannot get out of the car without assistance, without a wheelchair, what have you, without a special ramp, then you need to be very specific and very sure that you communicate that to the officer, and you don't want to reach for anything or talk with your hands or what have you. You're going to calmly keep your hands on the top of the steering wheel and say, "Officer, I'm disabled and I'm unable to comply." Officer, something like that. Or, "Officer, I'm disabled and I'm not able to get out of this vehicle." "Officer, I'm a disabled person and I can't get out right now." You may, if there seems to be a necessity for this, and again, I really do caution you, because the less said, the better. You could say something like, "Now, officer, I know you're just doing your job, but I'm just not able to do that. You see, I'm disabled, and, I know you're doing your job here, but I can't get out of the car." And leave it at that. Now, if you're told to get out of the car, you do. If you can, you do. But you calmly ask, once again, "Am I being detained?" Say it with me. "Ma'am, am I being detained?" Or, "Sir, am I being detained?" Or, "Officer, am I being detained?" If the officer tells you that you are, ask for your attorney immediately. Because now that you have that valuable information and you know you're being detained, you know exactly what your next step and your next move is. And that is to ask for your lawyer. You're done. You ask for your lawyer, and that is all you need to say. And if they keep pressing you, it's a simple, "Officer, you've told me I'm detained, and I've asked for my lawyer. I need my lawyer." And then from then on, just, "Officer, I've asked for my lawyer. Officer, I've asked for my lawyer. Hey, officer, I'm asking for my lawyer. Officer, I've asked for my lawyer." That's all you're going to say. And you're going to be respectful, polite, and confident about it. Really important stuff. Now, here is what I was alluding to before in terms of safety, and how I was going to tell you about a big safety precaution to take. You know what is the most important thing, in my mind at least, and to many lawyers' minds apparently, to keep you from having more trouble than you might already have if you're pulled over, or even if you go through a DUI checkpoint? A camera. That is the most important thing you can have. Now, I'm not just talking about a camera for candids and stills. I'm talking about a dash cam, or a rear camera, a rear-facing camera that records everything. And this is going to help to keep you safe and protected while driving. You should, even if you have a dash cam, also have your phone camera set up, preferably to live stream on social media. You're going to do all of this before the cop approaches your car. And then you're going to tell them that they are being recorded. And you're going to do so respectfully, calmly, and firmly. Now, usually this is pretty doable, as is getting your documentation together, since the cop will likely take a moment before approaching your car to run your plate and to see if they can manufacture probable cause or a reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed, which is legally what they need to produce. In the case of a Tarry stop, they need to be able to produce reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed. So in order to do that, they've got to get their stuff together, and they've got to run your plate, and they've got to figure out who they're dealing with and see how they can press you. So thankfully, you have time without doing anything kooky or crazy or making any big moves that are going to get you shot. You're going to carefully get all of your documentation together, turn those cameras on, live stream on social media if you can, or simply record on your phone as well as dash cam if you're in a place where you're not getting very good service and you can't live stream. But I do recommend live streaming if you can, because it really helps to keep them honest. If you guys remember, the Philando Castile shooting was tragically, but I think importantly, caught on camera. And I believe it was a live stream. So this is important. This is really important. It may help to solve your case if something happens. I hope that is not the case with you. I don't want that for any of you guys, and I'm sure you don't either. And I certainly don't want that for myself. But, if it doesn't turn out to be that serious and you're not involved in a violent incident, which God, I hope you're not, then it will help to back up your case should it go to court. Or should you have to file some sort of a formal complaint against the officer for being abusive or disrespecting your rights or violating you, right? So it's so important to have all of this information. Now, you have that time. You very carefully get all of your documentation out while the cop is back there running your plates. And then, so documentation first, and then you set up your live stream and make sure your dash cam is on, or your rear camera, whatever kind of camera you're using. This may give you a better chance of getting away without a false charge on your record, or something much worse. So it is incredibly important to verify and to make sure that you have backups of recordings, basically. There have been cases where the police have confiscated somebody's phone or confiscated another item, but it's not very likely that they're going to confiscate a phone that's live streaming. I know of one case where that actually did happen, though, and the evidence that was found on the phone was so damning that the police, I believe, just dropped the charge. So this will never work out to not be helpful in some way, or should never, I should say, work out to not be helpful in some way. And having that dash cam and then also having your phone live streaming, you're pretty well covered. And because you politely and respectfully informed that officer that, hey, officer, I just want to let you know that for your safety and mine, you're being recorded. This interaction is being recorded. You can say that up front. I have used that before. One time I had a situation. It ended up being a mistaken issue, but essentially, without getting into the story, the police showed up at my door, and I was just totally caught off guard. I literally was alone in my house, playing some music at a moderate to low volume, playing some light rock music. So I kind of thought, well, okay, there are police knocking on my door. All right. But what I did was immediately, I shouldn't have even opened the door, but I did, and I kind of made up for that in some measure by turning my phone on and recording and saying, you know what, you're being recorded. I want to let you know. And of course, the police officer had to come back with, well, you're being recorded too. I said, well, I sure as hell hope I'm being recorded because you've got a body cam on and I want that to be on. And he kind of just looked at me like, oh, yeah. I mean, that's why you have body cams. It's not so that you can, I don't know, look later and point fingers and go, ha, ha, ha. That guy had his fly unzipped. No, it's to protect you and us. That's a silly thing to say. You're being recorded too. But I did choose to inform the police that they were being recorded, and when I did, their demeanor changed drastically. All of a sudden, they lost a lot of their steam, and they kind of became a little flustered and like, oh, yeah, never mind, have a good night. So I want to give you the best chance of having that cop say something similar to you. Oh, you know what? You're fine. Have a good night. Bye. Or if something were to happen, I want you to have the best possible chance of being able to take that evidence to court. Because video evidence, particularly live streamed video evidence, is irrefutable. It's going to be damn hard for anyone to refute that evidence. So let's recap. I know we covered a lot. Let's recap. We need to be equipped with a dash cam. If you are going out this New Year's Eve and you have enough money, please, I urge you, go to Best Buy. Just make a real quick, wee little trip over to Best Buy before you head out. You may be glad you did. Get a decent dash cam. Now, usually they're somewhere between $60 and about $300 or $400. The median price for a decently rated one is about $120 to $180. So it should be somewhat affordable for most people, at the very least. And get one. Get it from the Best Buy or from whatever other electronics type store and put it in your car, even if you just have to get something cheapo for now. At least have something. Shoot, even just having like something that looks like a camera and perhaps saying, oh, now I have a camera. I just want to let you know, officer, I've got this camera here. Even that could help you. Hey, you know, I do have this dash cam and I do use it to record interactions like these. You may not want to come out and lie directly, but I'll leave that to you. But, you know, even something that looks like it's recording is going to be helpful in my book. And if you do have a camera that can actually record, better still. There are some cameras that will come with like a pack of 2 for around the same price. One which you can put on your dashboard or like hooked under your rear view mirror, and one which goes somewhere else in your car. You can put it in the back, you can put it in the middle of your car, hook it up to like the dome light. You could pretty much put it anywhere you wanted. But you've got kind of a 180 to 360 degree view of your car rather than just that 90 degree view where that one camera is going to give you, potentially. I mean, you might have a really fancy one that gives you a 360 view 100% of the time. But either way, having a camera is really important. And then, as I mentioned, having that added extra of like having your phone on and having it recording video, and perhaps having it live stream if you have connection and that's possible where you're at. This is good stuff. It's really important. You are protecting your own rights. Don't ever forget it for a minute. You better believe that they are not going to stand up for your rights and they are not going to protect your rights. That is down to you. And you have got this. You're going to handle it like a boss, okay? Folks, if you have other questions, feel free to ask. I do feel compelled to reiterate one final time that I am not a lawyer. I am not a legal expert. I'm just somebody who studies law on my own and has done so because I've had my rights trampled on. I have had my rights trampled on. A charge was actually brought against me when I was not even driving my car. My car wasn't even on. And a charge was still brought against me because the police didn't have anything better to do. They were in the area that I was in. My car was parked. I wasn't in it. And yet, somehow, they literally ambushed me and waited for me to come back to my car and charged me with something that was absolutely false. And it was a really frightening situation. I mean, it's pretty darn scary when you're 20-something to, like, return to your car, which is parked on the side of the street, I feel like in an appropriate area. I mean, that's where people parked at the house of the person that I was at for the moment. Like, that's pretty much where people parked. It's not like my car was blocking the street or, like, off in a ditch somewhere. It was parked by a house, right? Like, not super suspicious. Well, apparently my seatbelt had, like, caught in the door or something when I slammed my door, which used to happen all the damn time in my Ford Explorer. Let me tell you, that was annoying. But it happened, I guess, I assume. And, like, maybe the dome light was on in the car. But you can tell when somebody simply parked and the dome light's on because they accidentally left a light on or, like, their seatbelt got stuck in the door. But the police made it out to be some, like, really suspicious circumstance, and, oh my gosh, perhaps this car was used in a crime, and it's an abandoned vehicle. But that wasn't the case. It was literally a parked car that had simply had the bad luck of having the seatbelt caught in the door when I went to close the door, and the dome light was on. I don't feel like that's suspicious, but oh my gosh, the cops sure made a case out of it. And, and I had remote start at the time too. So as I was walking back to my car, I started my car. I mean, nothing wrong with that, right? It was cold outside. Oh no, they concocted this whole story of a car that was, like, somehow, like, on the side of the road abandoned with its keys in it. Not so. Au contraire, mon frere. The keys were in my hand. It's called a remote start, for those of you who are unfamiliar with that. But the whole situation was just such BS and so concocted and so silly. And yet, they initially made a charge stick. Now, I did have court officials, court records, etc., after many, many months and much money spent, that ended up making it so that the charge was taken off of my record. But, the arrest record is still there, and that looks bad and makes you feel bad. And was I doing anything dangerous or illegal? No, I wasn't. Would their time have maybe been better served protecting the citizens of this county? Yeah, probably. I mean, what are they protecting people from? Somebody parking and then returning to their car? So, like I said, if you happen to pull away from, like, a police roadblock or something, or turn around and go somewhere else and try to avoid it, it's very likely that, let's say, like I mentioned, your mom lives on the street before the roadblock. You turn off, you go to your mom's house for a while. The police could very well wait outside your mom's house, be looking in your car with their flashlights and what have you, and make a federal case out of it, when really you simply went to your mom's house, went inside, and then returned to your car and drove off. And you weren't breaking any laws. But seriously, you've got to be cautious about this, because they could literally follow you from that roadblock to wherever you're going, stop and wait, perhaps take an opportunity to look in your car and put their flashlights in your windows and look to see what they can find in your car that could be a reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime's been committed, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and then harass you or follow you to wherever you're going next. It has been known to happen. And lest you think that I'm being kooky and conspiracy theory-esque, I'm not. This has happened many times. And if you'd like, you can look up police roadblock videos on YouTube or DUI checkpoint videos on YouTube. And you can see this happening in real time and in recorded video. Many times somebody turns off, like I mentioned, or turns around before a police roadblock, which legally you have the right to do. They have cop cars ready and waiting to zoom right off after you, follow you to where you're going, harass you, follow you to wherever the hell you go next, or even just simply zoom right after you and pull you right over on the spot because you dared to take a different route. So again, innocence is no shield. You've got to be prepared. I don't want to sound kooky. I don't want to sound like I'm promoting some goofy conspiracy theory. What I am trying to do is to help you stand up for yourself and protect your own rights. And this is what lawyers recommend. Feel free to look that up for yourself, corroborate, confirm or deny, trust but verify, however you want to phrase it for yourself. Do your own legwork, do your own information. Perhaps I've introduced you to this subject, and now you have the opportunity ahead of you to do your own legwork. And I'd like to invite you to do that. I am not the authority here. I simply have personal experience and personal knowledge, and my own personal legal knowledge without being a lawyer. So that's going to do it, folks. Please be safe out there. Please be well. And lest you forget that I told you earlier, I'm going to repeat my initial caveat, my initial PSA, if you will. I am not in any way saying this, disseminating this information, or putting it out there to help anyone to commit a crime or get away with something illegal. I don't condone that. I'm not about that. I'm not okay with that. You do not have my blessing if that's what you're doing. And while on the whole, I would rather a criminal go free than a free person be charged with something or go to jail, I would hope that anybody who's listening to this is going to use the information for good and to protect their rights, and for only those reasons. Now, again, innocence is not going to shield you. You can't tell the cops your story. It's not a good idea. But I also don't want you trying to get away with something that you shouldn't have been doing. If you are doing something that's endangering other humans, then you need to stop. And perhaps you need to be punished in some way. But I think you have an opportunity ahead of you to stop and to help others like I'm trying to do now. So, again, be well, take care of yourselves. Please be safe out there. Be judicious, be cautious. I want the best for you. Be safe and have a wonderful new year.